Hey everyone, just real quick before the show starts, I just wanted to mention two things. First off is that originally we mentioned in the show that we wanted to do a segment on the campaign book and also a overview of the Hundred Kingdoms. We honestly we got so in depth at talking about the campaign book, we just decided kind of on the fly to make that what the episode is about. So we will be doing the Hundred Kingdoms overview next episode, which we are hoping to make this bi-weekly. Second thing I wanted to bring up is I was hoping to get more video edits in, so it wasn't just us being a couple of talking heads. Unfortunately, some things came up that caused me to be busy, and I was just really focused on getting the product out, so I do apologize in advance. I'm going to be trying to splice in more pictures and videos going forward just to make it a bit more interesting, so it's not Josh and I talking. Otherwise, please enjoy the show. Okay, so welcome everybody to another episode of Surrender, the first discussion of Peasants. My name is Rob, and joining me is Josh,
Hello.
Mr. Conquest New England himself.
I mean, I don't think that's entirely true, but that's fine.
Then who else?
I mean, I didn't win a tournament. I don't have I don't have all the models.
I mean, you don't have to be a winner.
You don't have to be a winner to be. You don't have to be a winner to be on this podcast. Is that what you're trying to say?
No, it's you can be a loser and be here. Anyways, so we got a show lined up. This is our second go. We have a bit more of a structured segment going on. So first we're going to be catching up a bit between the both of us, what we've been doing in Conquest, what's been going on in our lives. The next segment we're going to do, we are actually going to be doing a review of the Conquest campaign book, which I think we have a lot to talk about. And then lastly, we're going to be doing a faction overview for the 100 Kingdoms, the only army I play.
One of the 5 armies I play and own.
I know, you're such a...
It comes in a starter box. You can't not have them.
You can. You completely can.
Yeah.
Anyways, so what have you been up to as far as Conquest since we last recorded? Did you play any games?
So you and I actually
play any games?
I've blocked it from my memory because it was so painful. But I believe you and I got in a 1,500 point game. Your 100 Kingdoms versus my pale attempts to learn to play the Spire. I have since decided that I need to change my warlord and complete army composition, but we'll figure out this week if that is any better than my last go. Word of warning: when your catabolic nodes do nothing and do as many damage to you as your opponent, when your Strix barely blow up, things generally don't go well.
Yeah, honestly, those catabolic nodes, I love those things. I love them so much. I don't know. But also I feel like I had a good counter to them. I had a lot of chaff.
Chaff and healing. Healing makes a big difference.
Yeah. So the list I ran was block of 6 militia. 3 militia bowmen. I was running the dynastic alliance. I had the mage with the militia bowmen. I had 2 units of men-at-arms, I believe. Yep. One was 4 stands, one was 6 stands with a seasoned veteran, and then I had horse warlord. He was in a unit of 5 knights, and I had another unit of 6 knights. I believe that's what it was, and it worked very well for me.
You had a block of foot militia.
Yes.
And bowman militia.
Correct. Yeah. Correct, I did. So I feel like you smoked me so bad last game, it really made me reconsider how to play the entire army. So I'm like, I'm just going to bring a lot of shitty guys and then like maybe bring 1 or 2 units that can do damage. And it seemed to work pretty well, in all honesty.
I was trying the Pharaohmancer. I did not at any point in the game use my Pharaohmancy because it just didn't. The timing was not there. I took the Founders Pharaohmancer from last year,
who looks awesome.
Who looks awesome as a brute, in with a big block of 5 brutes. That was my hammer and my anvil, but they never really got a chance to shine. They only fed on chaff all game. I had 2 units of 4 force-grown drones with a catabolic node and the standard leader combo. They were basically just missile bombs. But with the Ferromancer being my warlord, I was hoping I'd get some healing and keep them around. They stuck around a little bit. I then had a high clone executor in with 5 Vanguard clones. He had Bastion. They had Fury. And then I had a unit of marksmen, and I had the unit of Strix, 3 stands of Strix. And the marksmen and the Vanguard clones just didn't want to show up. So by the time they showed up, your cavalry was already bearing down on them. You had the least effective cavalry charge I've ever seen.
Yep.
I think you might have done 2.
3, I think it was.
Yeah, three kills on a full full horse charge into the vanguards, and then we slowly whittled each other down. Whereas my marksmen just melted after they had a horrible round of shooting. And in the middle, I just couldn't take the objectives. The force-grown drones never moved to the men-at-arms. The brutes eventually wore down your militia and chased down your mage in the unit of bowmen, but it was far too late, and then I was completely out of position. Like I ran past the objective to go after the mage, giving up victory points, and by the time I turned around, it was 12-3 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very much a experiment that failed on my end. So.
I don't know. I actually liked your list. Like, I know a lot of people don't like the Ferromancer, but it's just I feel in my brain, if I were to play Spires, like I'd be taking blocks of like 9 to 12 force-grown drones, just because fuck you. Like, in all honesty, just like throw that many dice at them, they're not going away.
All right, so now we have to put up a PG-13 warning, and I think the Ferromancer just doesn't have as natively as good of buffs and options as the Biomancer. I really just took the Ferromancer for the healing and the Strix. The Strix got unfortunately charged before they had a chance to charge, so they kind of stood there and acted as a speed bump, which wasn't ideal. And then I just need to play with the order of the activations with the Ferromancer and possibly a Biomancer, because I'm used to playing Nords where we don't have a ton of draw events, and usually they're only affecting the unit itself, whereas a lot of the Spire stuff is draw your next command card, and then this does something, and then it goes back to your hero. And so there's a lot of cool possible synergy, but if you miss, or if your opponent grabs the initiative and goes in a weird place and your unit's all of a sudden stranded, it can go bad real quick. Which was, I think, what hurt me the most, was just never getting the mediums on the table, and then basically just not having the Ferromancer's bubble of options didn't really pan out. Like I can make my brutes insane, but if they're only fighting militia, then you're winning that because I'm wasting all these points on
yeah,
beating up militia.
it's funny with the Armor Con. I got some free stuff, and Johnny gave me 2 boxes of whatever I wanted, and guess what I picked for my 2 boxes? Did I tell you this?
I think so, yeah.
I picked 2 boxes of militia.
Their bodies, and they hold stuff up, and if 75 points or 90 points
for 75 points are the bowmen, which is why I take them, like, just because it provides me with more horses. You know what I mean? I can like, it's nothing. And militia are 90 points compared to men-at-arms, I think 105 base.
Yep.
So they're a little bit cheaper. If I had that window, I might bump them up, but then also it's like, now I'm addicted to men-at-arms with a seasoned veteran, and it's like, if I can't take the extra 20 points there, I'm like, I'll just put more militia in, kind of thing.
And support pays its dividends when you have two rows. Like you want at least 5 or 6 stands of militia to get that bonus.
Sure. Yeah, and yeah, it's I that's something that's great about this game, is that there's so much depth to it. Like, we're just talking about this one game we played. I played you at least 4 times now, and just every single time I played you, it's been such a significant learning experience for me, for better or for worse, and that's the really cool thing. So really, really quick, just so we're not rambling too much, have you got any hobby done recently?
So I spent the rest of that week building as many Fenrir beasts as I could, because those are just out and in our local stores, and also put together the Avatara for the first time and the Highborn lineage Avatara character, who was people had warned me was kind of weird to put her together just because her pose. She's holding her sword kind of behind her back with both hands, but the resin joints were super sweet and easy to identify. So I actually had no problem building her.
And
And just
honestly, sorry, not to interrupt, but those are my favorite models in the game. The Highborg's lineage and the Avatar, like those are like in the top three favorite models.
I wasn't sure how I felt about the Avatar until I built them, and now I'm sad that I didn't build them sooner. So they went together a little bit more. I just had to test fit stuff because they have a couple more options, and there's the three body types, and not all limbs go on all body types. But they're ready for priming for this week's game, so I'm going to try to get some paint on them and bring a Avatara list to see if that does more than a bunch of drones did last week.
See, this is just an example of how I'm probably a shit player. Is like if I were to go back and play Spire, like my two characters would be like a Ferromancer and a Highborn lineage. Like I just take garbage drones, maybe an Abomination, and just Avatara. Like that would be my list.
I don't think that's not a bad list. They're speed 7. They got crazy attacks. I can't decide what warlord trait or army wide ability for plus 10 points per stand. You can get them clash and evasion, which seems good. At the same time, healing is, well, you can't have them healing, but you can get the highborn or the lineage with 3 mutations. So your warlord can just be its own beat stick. So I have to sit down and map out which ability I want to take, because I kind of want all of them. So
yeah. So for me, unfortunately, I haven't done much painting, but I have done a ton of building. I finally built the rest of my house. I'm actually almost done with my building backlog, which is monumental. I'm about 1/3 through one box of militia, and then I only have one more box of militia, and I'm just caught up with everything. I'm caught up with building everything. I can just paint until I buy more stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And
which
that's the trick, right?
Which, by the way, the only reason I might be slightly upset we're starting this recording a bit late because of you is because I'm really eyeing a lot of the Nord stuff still.
Wait, oh, you were looking at it shopping wise instead of
Yeah.
Instead of recording.
Yeah,
that is my fault. I'm sorry. That is my fault.
It is. It's like you have a couple drinks. You see someone you like. It's same thing. All right, so we will be moving into the Conquest campaign book review. So stick around. All right, everyone, we are back. We are talking Conquest campaign book, the first of its kind. How do they do? Let's find out. So, the way we're going to do this review is not going to be like, a number review or anything like that. This is just going to be kind of an oversight of the book to see if it is right for you. So, I think we're going to have a lot to talk about here. So, let's kind of go over the kind of 3 main things that are covered in this campaign book. One is the new lore.
Amazing.
The new lore, which is kind of the old lore. So I think pretty much the story up to this point has been covering modern times. This is kind of almost windowing some of the ancient history of the world, right?
So certainly we had the background kind of with the fall, the spire, the Dweig home, and then and a little bit about the touching on the Nords and the 100 Kingdoms, but this is certainly going into some deeper dives into aspects that we had not been privy to before, that had been hinted at, or that were a passing sentence in a paragraph in some of the previous lore.
Right. And it's funny because when I was giving demos, one of the jokes I would make is, all the bad things in this world are traced back to the spires. However, not necessarily anymore.
Yeah, I'm sure we can find a way to blame them still.
I mean, sure, I'm always looking for an excuse to blame the spires. So, the lore, it brings in basically the three new factions we're going to see over the next 2 years.
That's the plan. Obviously, we haven't seen all. We don't have release dates for anything as of yet, but the idea was to hopefully get it in that 2020 or 2022 2023 window. Whether we'll see anything in the winter time is still up in the air. It doesn't. They keep saying there's surprises coming, but we don't know what that means.
So, for those of you who are new and listening to us, because we got a lot of new players in our local community, or maybe those who just want to recap. So the three new factions are going to be the Old Dominion, kind of this undead Roman Greek army. It's going to be fucking sick. We got the city states, not the dead Greeks and Romans. They're going to be another human army. I have a gut feeling they're going to be super popular, though. And then
there will definitely be some non-humans in that army, though.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, they've already confirmed Minotaurs. And then the third is going to be the Weaver Court, who are the spires who aren't assholes.
Well, yes, the best of the spire that had to leave because the rest of them were jerks.
So I guess how do you want to cover this? Do we want to roughly do we want to do an overview of everything? Do we want to kind of give some faction focus? What are you most comfortable doing?
You also forgot there's an entire section on the Woodrune. So
yes, there is also an entire dude. It's just like the Wardrune at this point. Things just move so quickly in this game. It's like the Wardrune are they're old news at this point. They've been out for 2 months.
I don't know if there is plenty of background on the Wardrune on the webpage and in the living world, but we definitely got much more detail on the Wardrune than I expected.
I just think it's so badass that they were one of the failed experiments for the Spire to basically retake their home.
Not only the failed experiment, but they were the failed experiment that they just kept pouring more and more resources into because they couldn't get things to work. And then when it finally worked, they couldn't figure out how they got it to work.
And they're just always hungry. Their metabolism is just they're a combination between the Warhammer Fantasy Ogre Kingdoms and Sparta.
I did not make the Ogre Kingdoms analogy, but yes, that is our metaphor there. But
it's because food is just such a huge it's the most important thing to them. It doesn't even say they get dehydrated and die. It's no, they starve and die.
Yeah. So yeah, so the big thing there, without giving away too many secrets, I guess. I mean, that's always the tough thing with something like this, where it's got some great
the email from the big cheese himself said, as long as we're not reading from the book, we can talk about whatever we want.
Oh, I know, but you still want to leave some tidbits and tantalizing reveals for people. So the big thing with the Wardrune was, like you said, they were experiments. The Spire realized they couldn't just have meat puppets, and they wanted their own perfect soldiers. So they built over. I mean, I assume we're talking at least centuries, but who knows, millennia-ish. It seems like they built effectively 4 perfect superhuman, super Spire, super Wardrune frames, and they just couldn't get a spark of life to kick in, like Frankenstein's monster type situation, although not Frankenstein, but the epitome of what a warrior should be. If you're a 40k aficionado, it's a Primarch effectively. I don't know what the closest analogy in fantasy otherwise would be, but I just these 9.5 foot tall super soldiers, and they basically couldn't they refined them physically to what they wanted, and then they just couldn't get them to animate.
I like it's interesting because it's just, again, all the bad things in the world seem to fall back to the Spire. I just kind of like how it's, even the Ward Rune existing adds so much character to the Spire. It's just the main event heals of the setting. For those who don't know Wrestle Talk, I always put things into wrestling, not like terminology. So a heel is the main bad guy, right? So they are the main event bad guys, in all honesty, of this game. And it's just kind of like they wanted to just send the Wardrune to this planet. They didn't even want to be there themselves. They're like, fuck it, we're just gonna plant what is, this almost like corruption that's just going to spread because they eat all their food and they breed and they fight. Like, that is the most Spire thing I've ever heard of.
Well, and they still had they weren't they also were still looking out for themselves because the Dweig home still had the number for the Spires, and still had a hatred of them. So they had to defend their own property as well as prepare to try to retake whatever realm they were banished from or fled from. So basically, and then randomly these four epitomes of the Wardrune receive life, and they can't figure out how, and they're so powerful that they basically lock them back in stasis, because they realize that if they ever were to free themselves, they basically could knock the Spire out of the city, the tower that they're in. And
Which
so
they eventually do, right?
They
destroy the actual tower, and that's the only documented time a Spire tower has fallen, right?
Well, so would the Spire effectively peel off enough of the what did they? I think they call them primes, right? They peel off enough of the primes to basically make Wardrune that are controllable, and then at one point the Dweig home launch a massive attack on their Spire, one of the Spires, and they realizing that they're going to lose their Spire, they awake the primes to lead the Wardrune against the Dweig home while they run away.
Yes, and it's interesting because I feel like in a lot of these background stories, particularly the Weaver courts, the Dweig home are kind of like almost one of the more important factions.
Well, and they're on the planet. Or on the. I guess it's the planet. I don't know if we've divided it up into individual continents, but they are the most advanced and eldest of the races on the planet, other than the dragons, which they also kicked some dragon butt and basically took over in place of the dragons. So the Dweig home do have once they're organized and have something in mind, they seem to be the most powerful force on the planet at the time.
Right. Okay. So, yeah, there's a lot of Wardrune stuff in there, and I almost completely forgot that, despite the fact I read all of it, because there's so much stuff in this book.
Right. So if effectively the Wardrune are able to
hungry.
They're able to break through the Dweig home cordon and effectively flee into the wastes, where over the next few generations they are getting slowly worn away by all of the hunger and the lack of resources. The Dweig home finished destroying the Spire tower that they attacked. We don't actually know where the rest of the Spire went at that one. Not the rest, but the Spire that were living in that tower fled to. And then at one point, the Wardrune basically return to that Spire in desperation and find things still living in the basements and dungeons that are both food and competition. And then from there, they effectively establish that as their new home base before stabilizing their own civilization. And there's a ton of lore about how that happens and why it happens, and how and why they end up sort of breaking out into the different not chants but tribes that they have now. So they end up using the fallen Spire that the Dweig home have no use for, or I say spire, the fallen citadel, basically, of the spire, as their home base to effectively prevent themselves from going extinct because they were so pushed to their limits after having to flee that battle. And most of them didn't survive that battle. Like three-quarters of them, if not more, did not survive that initial battle when they effectively got their freedom because the spire ran away.
Right. So, yeah, if you're a Wardrune player and you want to know lore that's beyond the website, definitely pick up this book. There's a lot. But let's move on to some of the other factions. So, we'll go with the Lost Dominion.
Old Dominion.
Old Dominion.
I mean, I guess
They're lost. Yeah.
They're lost and old. They're old
They're
and
lost
lost.
and old. Depend who you ask, I guess. So they're practically going to be the undead faction. Let's kind of shotgun through these a bit, just because I think this is more of a pitch of what they are going to be. So really, they are going to be the game's undead faction, and I think it's going to be really cool looking because there is going to be elements of both kind of Greek Roman elements to it, but as well as kind of almost like Christianity, angels and demons kind of look to them. There is some new art that I don't think they have on the website. I will not show them because there's probably going to be some splicey going on while we're talking. But oh my god, just like the lore really set more the visuals for me.
Go ahead.
No. I was going to ask how do you feel about it?
I mean, I think the Old Dominion, the story is fantastic. That this is the remnants of the fallen god that effectively, was the god of the humans first. That sort of went insane, and then effectively fell to Earth or fell to Ea, destroying much of civilization, and in trying to save itself, effectively fragmented itself into so many small pieces that they took up residence in anything that was already dead. Effectively granting unlife to the dead things, but also corrupting basically anything else, including other demigods that they came into contact with. So even creatures and entities that were trying to protect themselves or protect their followers or protect their civilization from the fallen god became corrupted, and now, thousands of years later, there's this pulsing evil insanity in the center of Old Dominion, where things are starting to stir and push against the edges of the boundaries that for centuries have been sort of a no man's land, and now things are starting to move, and again, literally demigods that have been turned into, whether they're insane or just evil or just corrupted, are kind of potentially leading these armies. So we have all of the fallen, undead skeletons and warriors from all these past civilizations that have been entombed in catacombs throughout the countryside, as well as potentially anything that's died, as well as potentially other sentient gods given form, leading some of these war bands as they encroach upon the rest of the known civilizations and known world. So much realm of potential for sculpting and for just the scale of what we're going to be seeing. Realistically, we've only seen the one undead Old Dominion model that's in one of the organized play kits for this year, which they haven't said what it is. We don't know if that's a run of the mill character or a an elite hero, elite unit, or just a random representative of the Old Dominion. But certainly,
I don't know. Did you ever play Eternal Darkness for the GameCube?
Did never play GameCube.
So he kind of looks like there's a mission where you basically have to deliver to Charlemagne, but it's like a cursed scroll kind of thing, and the guy just looks like the person that delivers, like the scroll. Like he's just obviously evil, but your main character is just like, oh, I don't care, like I don't care, sketchy hunchback, slinking, pale, cracked face dude, like
Right.
whatever.
Pale, crunchy, face cracked, wearing armor, but also a lot of cloaks. Like, are those death shrouds? Or is that their attempt to, blend in with the peasantry and sneak around in the countryside?
And just one thing I think I want to add before we move on to the Weaver Court is visually one cool thing I think I remember reading in the book is the fact that they actually used parts of the city to like replace parts for certain people and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like we might get, part flesh, part stone monstrosities, and I have complete faith in Parabellum. They're going to do something sweet. In fact, there's actually a picture in the book of an example of that. Yeah, it looks something a bit like a Junji Ito nightmare. Let me just say that.
The very earliest play or rules that we heard were a theory. So this is not anything that's been.
Ooh,
This is not. This is from years. This is literally from before they did the Living Worlds. When they had just basically mentioned like, oh, if we do an undead faction, it'll be Old Dominion, and their shtick, which again, I have no idea if this is going to hold true, so this could be completely wrong and just outdated information, was that they wanted to play around with the concept that each fragment, each undead power fragment is undestroyable. So you kill the body, and then the power would basically go to something else on the army, on the field. So that the idea was that as you lost your chaff, your elite troops or whatever was remaining would become more powerful.
That sounds
as the army,
dope as hell.
yeah, because that's the whole idea, is that there's this finite amount of energy that the fallen god has spread amongst all of these effectively, not cylinders. What's the word I'm looking for?
Shards.
Shards, yeah. And so as each shard is destroyed, the power basically goes back to whatever next most powerful thing is nearby.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea that again, I don't know how this would work on the tabletop. I don't know if this is even still a thought, but the idea that you could have start the army with hordes of weak stuff, and then as things die, whatever's left on the table just becomes more powerful, is a super cool way of potentially representing that power creep and that never-ending undead strength that we see in a lot of undead armies, but it never quite makes it onto the table.
Yes, so they are the winner. They are coming next. But let's move on to the Weaver Court, which kind of stole my heart, to be 100% honest.
Your little bug, plant, insect, fern-ridden heart.
So generally I like the concept of druids, like in D&D. I liked wood elves in Warhammer Fantasy. I kind of liked the more nature races, and the Weaver Court lore, we'll briefly go over it, is really cool. So basically, correct me if I'm wrong, they are the spire that didn't become like the spires. They kind of went off their own way, and they literally merged with nature.
Yeah, so the big thing with the spire on EA right now is that they have adopted the ferromancy and the biomancy and sort of corruption of life, and originally they were effectively life binders or life givers.
Mm-hmm.
So the Weavers are the ones who said, we're not going to give in to this debased form of biomancy and ferromancy and destruction. We want to preserve the world. And they fled when they saw the spire falling and into this corrupted state. And as they explored their domain, they realized how wonderful the life on the planet was, and have basically spent the last few millennia merging themselves with both elemental forces, but also plants and animals and insects. Anything to do with nature. And apparently this is as close as anyone else has come to sort of the life-giving aspects that the dragons that ruled the planet originally were able to do. So they apparently have contacted with some of the remaining dragons and are basically able to befriend these life-giving druids, for lack of a better term, through their manipulation of life without corrupting it, but by merging with it and accepting it, so that some of them walk around constantly changing their appearances or gaining aspects of the world around them. Some are more dedicated to different aspects of the world, and others have dedicated themselves almost to the raw elements. And again, the artwork is amazing. I can't wait to see how the sculpts portray that.
Yes, and so I know we'll probably going a bit more in depth with this with our 100 Kingdoms breakdown, but they are the most obvious ones how kind of their faction breakdown is going to be.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you got literally the seasons, and I feel like that's going to break down how the army plays. And I have to tell you, I'm leaning heavily towards autumn, mostly just because I like their philosophy, but also because just I already have my color scheme planned. I already have it planned. I know exactly how I'm painting them. Autumn's going to be my season. I don't care if they're garbage on the field. I am going to have the sexiest looking army.
I mean, I don't think anything Conquest has put out has been garbage on the field, or Parabellum has put out. So I think you're okay there. My issue is going to be, I suspect the characters will dictate the theme, much like you pick your chant for Wadroon or whatnot. But then that means I'm going to have core troops for spring and fall and summer and winter. So I'm gonna need 4 groups of armies just so I can pick and choose which of my Weaver leaders, which of my Weaver heroes. Also, they mentioned specifically horned cats as cavalry mounts.
Oh yes.
Something is going to be riding. I don't know if these are rhino cats or unicorn cats or some other weird permutation, but I definitely am envisioning a monstrous cat cavalry elemental force. So make that happen, Parabellum. Make that happen.
Yes. And one final thing I want to add is just folks who are a fan of Legend of Zelda, particularly the N64 era. There's a piece of artwork in there that looks similar to a Zora, and it will just make your heart sing. It's so beautiful. Anyways, we'll quickly recap to City States to kind of cap this off, just because we've been talking about this so much, and there's so much to cover in this book, to be 100% honest.
So true. Very true.
So City States were the second place winners, I believe.
Yes, yeah. Weavers unfortunately are last, so they have the most time to develop my amazing cat cavalry.
Which is fine because, I might dip into Nords. I don't know. Like, whoever my second army is going to be, like, it's going to mean so much because I'm just loyal to my 100 Kingdoms. I'm just so loyal to them. So City States, they are going to be this kind of Greek-Roman hybrid of things. So do you want to quickly recap their lore, and then we'll do our theories?
Their lore, there's a lot of Greek and Roman names. Effectively, the leaders of those, those that were in the Old Dominion that saw things going south, not directionally south, but going down the tubes, effectively, migrated out of the Old Dominion before the fall, and this, their leaders wanted to set up organized cities that would effectively survive the impending doom, and set up groups of politicians that would not succumb to hubris and weakness and infighting and bribery. And so they set up all of these cities across the area, the city-state region, and immediately things like infighting and hubris and bribery started to occur. And each of different city-states tried to handle it in different ways. Each of them basically had their own mini civil war or revolution, so that now you're left with a group of these city states that have embraced what they kept referring to as kind of technomancy, and sort of not steampunk, but the science.
Oh no, they're pretty steampunk. I have a tinfoil.
They don't
I have a
call it
tinfoil hat
steampunk.
theory. They're gonna be very steampunk.
They don't. It's a little more subtle. I feel like more. It's clockwork without. I don't know that we have steam engines as much as as much as magical powered equipment. But I could be wrong. We have to see. They did bring with them other races that were perhaps ostracized or on the edges of society, including minotaurs and centaurs are the two that I think get called out specifically.
We're totally gonna see Medusas though. Let's be 100%
yep.
honest. And I have a mega tinfoil hat theory on what one heavy will be.
Is it a Trojan horse?
No,
no, it's not a Trojan.
actually.
Okay. And then so only really one of the city states that was founded by effectively the smartest and the wisest has sort of stayed true to the idea of this democracy, whereas all the other city states, some of which have been effectively corrupted or wiped out, others which are led by more of a social conglomerate that may or may not be corrupt, others that are led effectively by the technomancy, others that are led by just their technology. So you're setting up a very interesting dynamic where you have multiple city-states that were founded on the same principles but have gone their own ways. They are, they have the common threads of their people, but they also, have infighting within the realm, and also they're going to be competing with each other for resources. Certainly, the theme or the appearance is this Roman Greek combination with the big helmets and the spears and the swords and shields, lots of flowing cloaks. So a very very attractive army on the table before you even add in all the weirdness and all the possible steampunk-esque attributes. I don't know that they call out powerful magics at any point. I feel like they tried to stay away from that because of the fall of the Old Dominion. So I don't know what, as far as sorcery they have, if it's all just going to be mechanical sorcery, or
I think it will be priests exclusively. If I had to guess.
But I mean, as far as they don't necessarily call out like miracles and as much as like we have with the 100 Kingdoms and the Thieves priests and such. But again, there's lots to develop and plenty there. It's a very in-depth story with lots of named heroes and named locations that or reminiscent of the fall of, or the weakness of humans, and even the best laid plans of the smartest leaders that try to account for the fact that they know people are easily corrupted, and yet we are easily corrupted and sort of fall to our basic instincts of survival and power corruption. Is one of the themes that I really enjoyed in reading through that, where just everything they saw coming, they predicted and did everything they could to avoid, and it still came to pass.
Wow, Josh. I just want to put little plastic soldiers across the battlefield, and you're talking to me about the deep philosophy of preparing for own inevitable death. I mean, and yet it will still come!
They survived.
It will still come!
They survived. They got out of the Old Dominion. A lot of the background here, I do feel like a lot of the background here in the campaign book is historical, and I'm wondering if they're setting that up for the 1.5 hardcover companion to be more current events. You know, like if we
Yes.
when we open that up, I think they just teased the table of context today, table of contents today, and I'm wondering if we're going to get a lot more of the state of state of the nations in the 1.5 companion, whereas this campaign book is sort of looking at a lot of the how things got to where they are. So you can take those two books and you know get a real full picture of where you're at in the wars on Ia at this point.
So I'm going to say two final things before we take a break and move on to Living World and the actual campaign. So one is my tinfoil hat theory is a heavy unit of city-states is going to be a Spartan death ray. Whether or
Okay.
not that is going to be on a Trojan horse or not, it's going to be several mirrors that just reflect down
I
upon
mean,
whoever, and they just incinerate whoever they aim at.
and if that doesn't happen, you can convert one and plug it in on the table as your ranged, you know, artillery unit. That'll be fine.
And then also, just kind of as we're talking about this, it's interesting because it does feel like a plot shift within the story. Is that what is happening in the living world? That's the current conflict. Now it's talking a lot about the past and how it's potentially going to start biting these factions in the ass. Even like the Spires and the Wardrune, like there's so much stuff there just alone. But
Right.
it's going to be really interesting to see how things develop going forward. But anyways, we're going to take a quick break, and then we are going to be going into the current state of the living world, and then also the rest of the campaign book. And also, so we are back, and we are going to be into phase 2. Phase 1 was there's a lot to cover with this book, to be 100% honest. There's a lot of lore, which is honestly very exciting. Like, we could probably actually talk about lore for an entire episode, but we're going to be moving on to kind of, I guess, the second part of the lore.
Well, in the
Which is-
first, ooh, what just happened?
Oh, what happened?
Oh no, that was on me. Something moved. The first 60, well, there's a table of contents, but it basically the first 68 pages are lore, but then even the living campaign is more lore.
It is more lore.
So
So I do want to talk about the living campaign, because as we were talking actually before the show, is that I feel like the living world is not talked about enough.
I 100% agree. It's such an amazing, not just website, but the amount of effort that Parabellum's writers are putting into maintaining and providing content for the living world.
Which that's mostly Leandros, right? Is that how you say his name?
So they have multiple authors. I believe Leandros is more the gameplay, and then I know Beasts of War on Tabletop has done a lot of interviews with different artists. Stavros, I think, is one of the main creators, and then. Yes. Oh no, I guess it's Stavros and Konstantinos and I'm gonna mess this one up. Vangelis is their one of their graphic designers, and then they have a bunch of artists. But I think Stavros and Konstantinos are the main like creative and writers for the lore, and I think Leandros and his team are more of the gameplay. At least as far as right now goes.
Yeah. So I want to give it, credit where credit is due, because this might be one of the most controversial things I'll say on this podcast, but I actually think the living world is the most ambitious thing going on tabletop right now.
That and certainly the most under talked about amazing thing going on.
Absolutely. And I think dare I say, the main thing that I think separates Conquest from the other games is just the setting. Right. I play so many fantasy war games. I used to play the Games Workshop stuff. I play Kings of War. I play Song of Ice and Fire. I dip my toe into so many things, but the fact that this world is just revealing itself, And not only is it revealing itself, it is actually guided by what the players want. I can't think of another company that has said, you know what? Let's let the players dictate everything. Like Games Workshop in the past has done campaigns that kind of alters, like low key, the history of the setting, but nothing quite to this extent.
And it's ongoing. Like the vote for the Old Dominion versus city states versus Weavers got a fair amount of internet hoopla, and people joined into Living World because of that. But it was going on before that, and it's continued beyond that. Like every week, every month, they're tallying up votes and giving people options for which characters do what throughout the whole world in all the factions to see where the story's going to go. One of the biggest obstacles, I think, honestly, is like I kind of got away from the Living World for a bit, jumped back in. Like there's just a lot I need to catch up on.
Yeah, and like I think the most mind-blowing thing is I went back onto Living World, and it's like if this vote goes by this percentage, people fucking die. Characters who have existed since the beginning now have a chance of absolutely dying, and I'm like, holy shit. Like that's insane. That's right. So cool.
Yeah.
And man,
and no one's talking about it. I mean, not no one, but it's not as talked about on social media as it should be. Just there's so much going on behind the scenes that makes it into these amazing campaign and lore books. But you have the option to be involved in that on a monthly basis. And the website just has so much stuff buried in it as far as lore and details and information on different characters. And if you have an interest in your faction or an interest in moving the story along how you want it to move, like you need to get onto the Living World on a regular basis and be checking in and voting.
And I could go on an entire podcast rant on why I think this people aren't looking at this as important as it should be, but it feels important to me as the person. I have a certain army loyalty, right? Like I want the 100 Kingdoms to come out on top, right? I want my faction to win, but a lot of people I know, no offense targeting you, but I'm totally targeting you. You buy all the armies. You actually have no faction loyalty.
I have a faction loyalty to all the factions. That's the problem.
But it doesn't fucking work.
It does work. I whatever I'm playing at the moment is what I've invest in on the Living World and figure out what the storyline is and where I need to put my votes.
And some early predetermined, some old ancient table troop when this was originally a thing. We talked about this in Games Workshop games. Is there's no faction loyalty anymore. People play the Army of the Month. They see, oh, Imperial Knights got a new codex. Oh, they're really good. I guess I'm just going to sell everything I own to get an Imperial Knights army so I win all the tournaments. And unfortunately, I feel people are just so spread out with this game. There's not a lot of... Anyways, this is where I go into the rant. But I wish the Living World caused more faction loyalty.
I think there are definitely players who only play one faction and who are invested in their Living World. It's also anytime you have a newer game, and Conquest has been around since I think the earliest copyright is 2017. It might be 2016, but really didn't make it. They start making waves till 2018, at least here in the States. Like every time a new faction comes out, you're going to get a upswing and a swelling of interest in that faction, and then somebody's losing fans from their faction when a new faction pops up. With there being only 5 factions, I think it's very easy right now to get behind your 1 or 2 factions that you really connect with. I don't think most people have 5 factions. They might collect them, but they're probably not playing them on a regular basis. So I don't know that I'm typical there. And I think I end up playing all 5 factions so that my opponent can play whatever they want. Like
Right.
if I only played Nords and my opponent also wanted Nords, not that Nord versus Nord action is not interesting, but like if you want to play Nords, I will play something else against you so you can see how those factions work.
Right.
Um,
So, I can look at you, but you're again Mr. Conquest New England. You make sure everyone's needs are met and everyone's educated about the game as much as possible when you introduce it. So you
or
get a pass to that.
or I
But
just have a problem.
or you have a problem. Um but anyways, I don't want to go too into this. Maybe this can be a topic for another discussion, but the living world is the coolest, one of the coolest things about this game, and I don't think it's talked about enough. But
Agreed.
anyways, part two is
Well,
basically
so your homework, if you're listening to this, is go to the Living World, sign in, make sure you're signed in. That way your votes count, and start reading and voting. Even if it's just once a month, pop in, take a look around, click on the map, zoom in, zoom out. Don't forget to zoom out because sometimes you won't see all the things that are there if you're depending on how your settings are. And do a little bit of reading, and put in some votes and push the storyline however you see fit. That's the best way to get involved. And then your other homework, part 2, is to mention it to somebody else in the community who you play with or talk to
mhm.
online, and remind them that the living world is there, or that this cool storyline is happening. And let's see if we can drum up some more interest in the
so
living world.
so this is Table Troops reminder to go do your living world vote,
Yes.
basically. But really, the part two is basically recapping the living world, which I think they've dubbed it the Rismark campaign.
Yes, it's based around the Rismark, 100 Kingdoms area, and effectively is what happens when the 100 Kingdoms decide to start poking the bear that they shouldn't be poking.
I mean, fuck Nepenthe. That's all I have to say.
Uh,
Anyways, so yeah, it's a recap of that. We're not going to go in too much detail, but the thing is, I think one thing about this book is them trying to push how important the living world is as far as landmarks. And if you are a person that has a case of FOMO, which for those of you who don't know at home, fear of missing out, from like historical aspects, this book could actually be a cool historical piece for the game. So if you're a collector, this is definitely, I think, going to be a plus to it, because this is kind of almost like a historical document of everything that's happened in this game so far.
and as the world opens back up, and events and tournaments and conventions start happening, like there's a lot of material in here that would be great for a mega battle or a campaign day to decide what votes are going to get placed in Rismark. You can certainly set up some either unequal scenarios or historical quote unquote reenactments if that's something that you are really interested in, or that grabs your army's attention, and you could run those using this as a background, using this as a backdrop, which I know a lot of other games, more historical gamers especially, really enjoy those scenarios that are
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily equal, or that have a historical background and how things started or ended. And does your tabletop results match the lore? So there's
Which is actually going to be a thing on my final opinions of the book, and I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on the historical aspect of it. So anything else you want to add to part two before we move on to the actual rules and stuff like that?
I mean, just again, I think that they've done an amazing job of fleshing out parts of the lore that haven't been discussed before. Although it's based around the Spire 100 Kingdoms initial conflict, there are so many other moving pieces. The Nord section, what I really enjoyed, just talking a lot about the vulva, and the how many centuries they've spent sort of behind the scenes and working their magics to try to get their I won't say cult because that's not the right word, but to get their people into a position to take power back, and just each faction gets its own moment in the sunshine to sort of see how they are involved in this historical campaign. And again, we've gotten ancient history, more recent history, and likely we're going to be seeing, I'll say, modern history, modern setting history going forward. So there's all different layers here as far as how much immense amount of time and effort they've put into making this background interesting, unique, and intriguing. So grab the book, read the book, play the book, vote online about the book, and tune in 2 weeks for the next episode. Surrender.
Yeah. So we'll recap, I guess, our thoughts, because I guess we don't want to talk too in depth about the campaign system, right? Because we don't want to be someone that reads. So I've played a couple of map campaigns in my time. So maybe I'm not the most experienced person, but I have had experience in it. So I am very interested to actually play this out, to be 100% honest. I really, really like the rules. And oddly enough, I think my favorite rules in the overall rule set are if you just get decimated. Like, is that the strangest thing to say?
I mean, it happens in the game all the time, so it seems appropriate.
So the rules I like. So correct me if I'm wrong, if I've read this incorrectly, because you're Mr. Rulebook here. Is when your capital, I guess, gets conquered, is that you either have to swear fealty to the person who took you over, or you become a rogue nation and you basically kind of fight to retake your capital, and you always have a chance to retake your capital.
Yes, you basically are kicked out and have to decide which direction you're going to bend the knee to.
And that is so fucking cool. Like, that almost would make me not feel bad, because I don't know, I really, really like that. And the resource systems with building buildings, taking them down, getting extra points to going into your territory, certain priority orders of what army you're playing, right? Because really let's say this now, because this book might become quite dated if you want to play it accurately over the next 5 years or so, because you need to play it to its accuracy. You need a Spire player, you need a Dweg player, you need a Hundred Kingdoms player, you need a Nord player, you need a Wardrune player. That is the accurate way to play this campaign book. So years from now, when we have Old Dominion, stuff like that, yeah, maybe you can finagle it, but to accurately play the historical content of it, you can only play those 5 armies.
Yeah, but I mean, as soon as you start playing the game, you're changing the history because your battles will go differently than they would have historically. So it doesn't bother me so much. Like it's not that it wouldn't be that difficult to claim the Old Dominion coming in from the west over the mountains, or the city states, again following the trade routes, or even replacing the 100 Kingdoms with city states if you needed to. Like that's not too difficult. The Nords or the Woodrune could be the invaders, or could be replaced by Old Dominion, or you could just switch out, spires for weavers and change the fluff so that it's not so much of a degenerate spire group, but it's the weavers defending what they think is the life spark that they've identified in that area of the continent. So like, it doesn't bother me. I don't know. I would have no problem changing it up. The only thing you would need, which that's a good question. I mean, obviously we haven't seen Old Dominion weavers and city states, but at least as far as the living legends tables go, we would need ideally specific tables for different units and heroes in the new factions. But I think that's going to be a part of the website, is that they're going to update the options for what they're calling the living legends, or effectively your campaign growth, if you choose to use those optional rules to get buffs for units that survive or accomplish great deeds on the table. Whereas you don't actually need those to play the historical campaign, I believe.
Right. So I guess so. I'm trying to think how in depth we want to go with this. Like, so a map campaign. Do we want to break down entirely how a map campaign works, or do we want to give kind of the Spark Notes version? You basically get a certain amount of points, and you can distribute them within maps of your territory. You
Yep.
have a capital city, and you move certain locations, and basically when certain armies, are on the tile, they have a battle, right, based on how many points you dedicate to that. So it
Yep.
might be you're down by 1,000 points, you might be down by 500, kind of thing. So it's very important where you put on maps and all that. I don't know if we really want to go more in depth or talk about that. And obviously certain tiles, they have terrain restrictions. I think there's a total of 6 types of things. It's like a capital, a swamp, a forest, ruins or city, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a challenge for gaming groups to stick to a map campaign and kind of ensure that the games get played. But as having a good foundation and having a good storyline that kind of motivates the players to follow through, excuse me, will make a big difference. And the it's not they actually have 2 different levels of complexity, which is great to see. Like there's literally a easy mode for map campaigns, and there's a
Mm-hmm.
you want some more depth and you want some more complexity, so take these rules instead. So they actually came at this pretty, or it seems like they can't, having not played it yet, it seems like they came at this well thought out and said, we're going to have players, we're going to have groups that can't get too involved and want this to be a relatively short campaign, and then we're going to have players who are seriously invested and want all the bells and whistles, and we're
Mm-hmm.
going to make sure that they also have options to play through as much of this as they want in as accurate a manner as possible,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is something I don't feel like I've seen that before. Like here's easy mode and here's the grognard version. And that just the fact that they're catering to those different levels of players in the same book, I think tells you a lot about how they see the community, and that they know everybody has a preference that's going to be different from the person next to them.
So yeah, that's all going to be part of, I guess, my final conclusion.
Oh,
So
I
I'm
don't
not.
know what your conclusion is. You haven't told me.
So well, it's because it's final. We got to talk about the rest, right? Um. So yeah, that's the map part. And then the other part of it is the I forget what they call it. Is it
The legends.
the legends? Yes,
Yeah.
which is basically your units get experience.
Yep. Your
and,
renown,
and
however you
the,
want to phrase it.
yeah, and they get fucking jacked. And what's cool is they actually say you don't have to use the map system. Like, for example, we could be like, hey, this game we're playing, do you want to make it a Legends game?
Right.
And we can bring our units and stuff. We can have our documents. And because I exclusively 100 Kingdoms and you play every army, I'll have a jacked 100 Kingdoms army and you just have nothing because you just play all the armies.
So you're telling me they're trying to psychologically train me to actually stick to a faction for more than a month?
Low key, I think they want that on paper.
They're not wrong.
But at the same time, they want to sell as many minis as possible. So I don't know. It's a dance, right? It's a dance, and they got you either way.
This is very true. Yeah, the winner here is both of us.
Right. So essentially, how it works is basically your unit gets experience for doing certain things, like if it kills a regiment, heavier than it, if it survives the battle, if it does certain things, it gets experience. And as it levels up, you can either buy certain perks or it gets certain perks by default. And, it can get, minor things, such as, well, maybe not even a minor thing. It's just like +1 clash or volley, or it gets fucking flank. You know what I mean?
You've faced too many Nord players. The most impressive thing about the Living Worlds Living Legends was just the breadth of accomplishments.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not just cookie cutter. Like each army's units have different goals. Each character basically has different goals. Some of them are things you have to accomplish in a game. Some of them are things you have to accomplish most likely over a good number of games. Like some of these things are not achievable in a single game unless things go really, really, really sideways in one way or another. And so you're tracking effectively your unit or your hero's success over multiple games to then potentially get a bigger buff. Which I just reading just flipping through the different options for the different units that are out was eye opening and inspiring to try to think like, oh, can I do that? Have I ever gotten a unit to do that? You know, have I?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And
Is my hero that good, or would I have to play in a completely different way to ever get that achievement?
right, and I think it's cool, and I actually think going forward with people that I'm more comfortable playing with, especially you, I'd be like, oh, you want to do some legends tracking with it,
And
and we could do our, we could document it and all that, and then whenever we play, just once in a while, it's like, oh, you wanna bust out our legends characters we have against each other, kind of thing. But again, yeah, just almost kind of like like Xbox or Steam achievements, right? Is I did this weird thing to give my character, free tactical 3 or something like that, which I think is really cool. I love the option of playing a bit more narrative.
it encourages that storyline. You name your characters, you name your units, you remember what they did in the game before.
Mm-hmm.
Were they able to hold the line or go monster hunting? Did your character accept a duel because they needed the kill, or did they decline the duel because you didn't want to lose them? And they already, they had achieved their personal goal for the mission or for the game, and you really didn't need to risk it, or give away points to your opponent, who was equally seeking to get their buff, so that the next time they play, they can add one more tick to that box and maybe be that much more powerful. So it adds a whole new level
Mm-hmm.
of complexity where you're going to want to play sort of the same or similar lists over and over again. You're gonna want that block of cavalry or that noble lord or that unit of militia to show up multiple times and not just switch armies or switch composition of your armies every game, because then you don't get as many. You're not going to build up that experience and have those buffs on those units going forward.
Right. So yeah, and that it's interesting because I do have quite a few thoughts on how they could have made this book from good to absolutely amazing. And I'm curious on your thoughts because the legend system is something else I think they kind of missed the mark on, was something they could have advertised in the book.
Well, do
So
you want to hit us with
so
the solid
but
resounding
before I
finale, or
go
do we have more?
before now I go on a Josh like rant. Is there anything else you want to add?
I don't think I've ranted. I mean, no, I think I've said my piece. I think it's an amazing book. There's a little bit in here for everybody. Whether it's background and inspiration for your next army, whether it's options for campaign play, whether it's just seeing, even if you wanted to set yourself the personal goals to achieve things with your living legends, just for your own edification, can you accomplish this in this battle, even if it doesn't get recorded anywhere? You can certainly do that. And all it did for me was inspire me to paint more and plan for the next 3 armies that I want to get.
Okay. So I will give my thoughts on this, and feel free, I guess, to contribute to whatever it is I have to say, because I do have some strong feelings on this book. So first off, the book is $30, $10 cheaper than if you were to buy another unit for your army, and I think that is quite steep for what you get. However, I think they are so close to making something amazing, to making this like an auto buy for both veteran and new players.
And what would that take?
So, my number one criticism of this book is for a book about miniature games, there is a severe lack of miniatures in this book.
That is something I don't know that any of their books have a lot of miniatures in them.
So,
In fact, I don't know that any of their rule books, the last companion, have miniatures.
They don't.
I feel like it is all
They
artwork.
don't. So, big mistake, and I feel like they really need to start changing that. So, I think both of us can agree that this book is covering a certain time period of within the game's history. They are covering something that's going to be part of the lore going forward, and it's hyping what comes next. And it is saying you want to participate to reenact this historical event. Here are the tools you need to do it. So
Agreed.
That is primarily what the book is to me. So right now, the only person I can recommend this book to is super fans. And if you're a new player coming in that is in love with lore, maybe. But if you're a new player, I'd be like, spend $10 more and add to your army, to be 100% honest. But what they could do, again, in my opinion, they're just so close. What they need, and what Parabellum has been quite shy of, and I kind of understand where they're coming from, but they need to start following up on, is they don't have a lot of miniatures to represent their history.
Okay.
I think what they could do, and I mean, this book is already enormous. How many pages is it? Because you have it right in front of you.
130, 133.
So I think they could add another 50 to 100 pages of this book, just to represent the historical armies that are to participate in, because this goes in for a lot of reasons. So one is new players coming in. They're like, okay, especially a lot of people are Games Workshop converts. Let's not pretend that's not what's happening here.
Right. If they're not playing BattleTech, they're playing this.
In a majority of people coming in, is people want to say, okay, well, what factions are there? They want that kind of representation. Okay, what's that? I think it was a missed opportunity to be like, okay, King Frederick's forces, right? What do they look like? What conversions could you do? Because the legend system, you have this idea for really fucking badass units, unique units. What are some conversion ideas? Like, I was thinking the other day, because I have so many household knights, I was like, what if I start putting these household knight shields on men-at-arms to represent their legends? Like, this is my badass unit. Like, if they eventually upgrade, you know what I mean? Like, there just needs to be, I think, more of that to represent that historical aspect. What do King Frederick's soldiers look like? What does Nepenthe soldiers look like? It's very odd. They're a new company. I know they want to show off their beautiful artwork, but this is a miniatures game, and this is a book about historical context within the setting. I feel they need to really start saying, if you want to reenact it, put in painting guides. Like, this is how you paint King Frederick as your noble lord on horseback, right?
I can see that, yeah.
So that is my number one kind of, you're close.
Right.
But this would be an auto buy. And to be honest, if they had all that stuff, they could maybe bump the price up by $10 for painting guides, for ideas on how to best do that, because both new players and veteran players want that, because the new players be like, oh, that's really cool, I really like that color scheme, I like these conversions, what bits do I need to buy, right? And then the veteran players who are like, I already have 2,000 points, 100 kingdoms, but if I want to represent King Frederick's unit, okay, I'll start painting my extra armies like this, using these painting guides, kind of thing, right? So that's kind of where I think they could do better. Again, close but no cigar. Really, the only people I can recommend this book to is the diehards of the game. I couldn't recommend in good conscience to a new player.
I think they have embraced their lore more than their paint schemes and miniatures. I don't know how much of that is because they love their lore or they just don't have the conversion bits. If that makes sense. I don't know how. I think we all, as miniature lovers, want more miniatures. And alternative sculpts of noble lords on foot, alternative chapter mages, a named feast priest, a named blooded. I think would all be amazing options. But I don't know if they're avoiding that because it's not something on their radar or if it's just a production issue. The only thing I would counter argument, I don't disagree with you as far as the new player recommendation. I see that, and I hadn't thought about it, but it does make sense if you're new to the game, you want more models, and you're not going to be playing a campaign with this level of detail. If you love the lore, you're going to pick this book up no matter what, which is I think agreed who they're selling it to. I will say, keep in mind when we look at the other companies that are out there, Parabellum is not asking you to put down any money for rule books. Otherwise, there's no codexes, there's no army books, there's no rule book. Everything is free online and updated. So for me, I'd much rather buy a well thought out, well written 134 page book that provides 3 layers of gaming than $50 for a 96 page book, 128 page book that I know is going to be outdated soon and that I'm not using most of what's in it. Personally, I don't need the painting guides. I kind of feel like that's maybe another social media issue. Mm-hmm. There should be, another page off of the main page on Parabellum's website should be tutorials and painting guides and step-by-step schematics on how they achieved some of their some of their color schemes, or how they would recommend starting for new painters. As I think about it, the starter box doesn't have any kind of painting guide, right? There's the rule book. Mm-hmm. I don't even know that there's a get started quick start. I think it's more aimed at gamers who know how to game, or at least build and paint. So that is definitely an area that they should probably be appealing to if they can bring in new gamers and provide stepping stones for them, whether it's in the back of a book like this or whether it's on their website or whether it's a pamphlet that is sold or given out to the purchasers of the army warband boxes or 2-player starter. Is an interesting idea.
Because that would actually be my number 2 suggestion, is if obviously they can't add on to the book that's been released now, but going forward, if they were going to have this book and they want to get it out to people, bundle it with a starter set. They are so good at bundling stuff. Maybe give this book 4 or 5 months or whatever, and then make it part of an online deal. You get the 2 units and you get the campaign book, because then it serves a purpose of the new players. They're flipping through, they're like, oh my god, what's the Old Dominion? Oh my god, what are
Right.
the Weaver Courts kind of thing. These are things that are coming out. Holy crap, I'm so glad I have this to know what's coming. It's almost like an advertisement, right?
Yep.
I just think it's in a bit of a weird situation because it's pretty much just exclusively for the diehards. Like if someone was like, "Oh, what do I need to add to make my game more fun?" You know what I mean?
Yep.
I'd probably just say spend $10 and get another box of miniatures, and
Yep.
that's my thoughts on it. But very good. I'm glad I purchased it because I'm a big lore buff. But that's pretty much what I got. I don't know if you have any final thoughts, theories, anything like that.
I mean, my only other theory is that they are a newer company that is exploring what their player base wants, and so I think feedback like that and more and from other people in the community is stuff they actually will listen to. So
Yes.
if people have strong opinions, if they're happy with their purchase or if they're unhappy with their purchase, like this is a company that will respond to you, or, maybe not you individually, but will respond to feedback on their social media and on Discord and on their YouTube and when they visit channels like on tabletop and stuff. I think they read that and they can, the next iteration of the campaign book could be more of a new hobbyist book, or they could put some content online and push the hobby aspect in a different direction based on feedback. If they sell these campaign books and get a lot of positive feedback and lots of people are logging in to record their games and their legends, then it's a success. If most people just read the lore and then don't ever do much with the campaign setting or campaign system, then they probably won't put out another one. So that's, again, your homework part 3 is let them know what
Yes,
you
and
want and what you think of the stuff that they've done, because they are able to respond and they are looking for feedback. As far as I can tell, every time I've had an idea or posted something to the pages, like it's getting read, it's getting responded to.
so yeah, that I mean, really, my number one feedback is you need more miniatures in your miniature game books.
Which is an interesting idea, because I do think it. I didn't even realize it until you said it. Like they don't have painted miniatures throughout their books, which is a departure from every other miniature book I can look around my room and see. But at the same time, I didn't notice it until you said it.
Yeah.
Like the artwork is so good, the lore is so good. It didn't even occur to me
Mm-hmm.
that there was a shortage there, or a deficit. So to me, it wasn't even something on my radar. But I can 100% see if someone picks this up in a bookstore or a game store and doesn't also have the miniatures right next to them for comparison, they're not going to necessarily know what the models look like, and they're maybe not going to be inspired to pick up that box of miniatures.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyways, I think that concludes our review for the Conquest book. We are super over time for sure. I'm not sure if I'm going to make the 100 Kingdoms overcap a whole new episode, or if we're gonna make just one super long episode. But regardless, there'll be something spicy to explain. So
we might want to do a separate episode and do 2 faction overviews.
So I will probably splicy in the fact that this will be one episode because yeah, we're way over. So anyways, anything else any shout outs you want to give? Because I guess this will be the end episode. We'll just do it.
Yeah,
we're so good. We're so good at this podcasting thing,
Hey, it's only number 2. I mean, again, I don't anticipate that this will be out ASAP, but we are looking to do multiple campaign and demo days throughout Massachusetts. We have one scheduled this week, which unfortunately, again, I don't think you'll put this out before.
No,
then,
I'll have it up because
what?
Yeah,
you're insane. There's like 2.5 hours of material here. So if you see this before Sunday, November 7th, we will be doing demo day from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. at Webway Games in Marlborough, Massachusetts. Great new shop that just opened up. So come on down Marlborough and Central Massachusetts and support your new game store, Webway Games. And then the following weekend, on Saturday, November 13th, we'll be in Quincy, Massachusetts at Alpha Omega. So come on down from 1 to 6, starting a little bit later on that Saturday, the 13th, for said similar demo days. If you don't know how to play, we have demo armies. If you're looking for an opponent, we will have people there with army lists and looking for opponents. If you just want to see the miniatures or ask questions, both stores have stock and starter sets available. And I believe that on Saturday there is some prize support as well at Webway Games. I don't know yet if we have any prize support at Alpha Omega, but they have a great game shop. They have multiple gaming tables, plenty of space to spread out, and it'll be great 2 weekends of gaming if you are in the Massachusetts, New England area. Also, Thursday nights from 5 p.m. onward at the Armory in Fairhaven, Mass. We are doing open play. If you post up and are looking for a demo, we can make that happen. If you just want to come on down and get some games in, then definitely do that. We're typically shooting for 1,000 or 1,500 point games. But again, post up on any of those 3 Facebook pages, Webway Games, Alpha Omega, or the Armory Games and Hobbies, or the New England Facebook Conquest page, and we can make sure that you have a good experience at one of those 3 shops.
Yes, and I will do some quick shout outs. First off is if you are a constant contributor to Conquest, I know we're trying to get some folks in here. Love to get you in for interviews and segments for this show. I know we were going to talk about this being a 2-segment show, but a lot to talk about. I think we underestimated the discussion for it, so feel free to reach out to me, robfox1989 at gmail.com. You can also reach out to me on Facebook. I'm Rob Fox, or on Discord I'm Balrob. Josh, what are you on Discord?
I am just Josh H, in parentheses Rhode Island, so pretty easy to find. Josh H.
Reach out to any of us. And then also feel free to, like and subscribe this video. Anything helps, trying to really support local community, local business, as well as also just community within the Conquest as a whole. So any support to me is me giving support to everyone else, which I'm hoping to do going forward. Also, just because I'm wearing their shirt, shout out to the Nat 30s. They're a local Twitch D&D streaming group. Finally met Izzy at ArmorCon. Super cool chick. And her friends. They're on Twitch, the Nat 30s. So please check them out. And just one final thing I would like to say, because I am hoping to get this out before Thursday, is that Amy, you and your shitty spires are going down. You are about to eat horses, and you are about to eat mountains of lances.
This is only true if he starts assembling models quickly.
They're already done.
Oh, they're done?
Oh, they're done.
Uh-oh, somebody's been speed painting.
No, well, they're
speed building.
I need to get the tack to stick the horses to the base, but otherwise they're done. Anyways, have a fantastic night, and we will be doing our 100 Kingdoms coverage for another episode or segment. So have a good night.
Peace.